Hi, and welcome back to Continual. I'm your host, Jim Nettles, as we now go trotting off into the depths of darkness of our souls and bad horror. We're going to be talking about all of our favorite horror films this evening. So let's go around and see who is bringing in some of their favorites to contribute to that. Well, let's just go trudging off into the darkness and have the, skinny dipping with the teenagers and all the good stuff. So, Layla.
Hi, I'm Layla Dorine. I write LGBTQ fiction and romance, and I love monsters.
Derek?
Good evening. My name is Derek Austin Johnson. I am a horror writer. I have a story coming out in Midnight Tales later this year. I, too, love monsters.
Jenny?
Hi, I'm Gini Koch. I write the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for Doll Books. I also write under a variety of other pen names and in all lengths and genres. And in horror, I write as J.C. Todd.
Ken?
I'm Ken Lange. I write lit RPG, science fiction, and fantasy. And I too love monsters, usually the Scooby-Doo version.
Bill?
I'm Bill Mulligan. I've published one book from Falstaff Books, and I just sold 2 short stories to 2 different anthologies, so I'm exploring that too. I love monsters, always.
And Matt?
Atlanta author Matthew W. Quinn. I've loved monsters since either Calvin and Hobbes or the Crestwood Monster series. Remember those orange hardback books? They're Universal Monsters with black and white movie stills in them.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
That's going way back.
Wow.
Well, my elementary school library had them. I think they were published in the 80s.
70s.
Mm.
I know this
70s.
because I used to check those out of my elementary school library when I was in 4th and 5th grade.
So I think that's actually a pretty good place to start, is who is your first monster or movie monster? And who was the one that brought you into this world of finer misshapen creatures? And Layla, you're up first.
Well, it's a dual answer because my stepdad was military, and while my mom, who was also military, was away, he was not necessarily the most careful about what he rented and let me watch. So in the most terrifying evening of being like 8 years old, he introduced me to Leatherface and Freddy. That was my monster introduction. And this was a man who loved Dolby surround sound and Bose speakers. So when he would put it on, the whole house would just feel like you were right there in the movie. And then after I'd seen them, he'd watch them when I was in bed, and I would wake up terrified because all you could hear is the music from Nightmare on Elm Street and later in the night, Leatherface's chainsaw. And I love being scared. It's like it's fun and it's terrifying, and somehow that just really is inspiring to me. So when I look back on that, those will always be my 2 top movie monsters because Dad scared the crap out of me.
Derek, how about for you?
Well, here's where I need to fudge a little bit. I just need to know, clarifying question, are we talking about movie monsters or are we talking about monsters in print?
Go for whatever makes you happy.
All right, because I've got 2 in print that really left the biggest impression on me. One of them was the Headless Horseman, who chased Ichabod Crane in watching Narving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. For the most part, the story for a 6-year-old's a bit of a slog, because you don't really care about Crane, who's he's kind of this nothing guy, and he's a jerk, but your veins will be pumped full of Freon as you're reading the Headless Horseman chasing him, across this bridge. Still one of the most terrifying moments I had ever read as a kid or as an adult. The other one comes from early to mid 70s was when I was exposed to him. It was Kirk Langstrom, Man-Bat from the Batman Neil Adams. I think it was Neil Adams comics run. For me, it's really sort of the prototype, or it's my introduction to the Jekyll and Hyde sort of character, but also the idea that somebody could have this kind of horrific transformation and become utterly lost in this other kind of being was absolutely terrifying to me.
Jenny, how about for you?
Okay. First off,
Knowing how much you love horror.
I am the scarediest of cats. All this stuff terrifies. That's why I write horror, because I'm scared. So it's easy to write. I actually kind of have three. Two of them really probably don't count. Dark Shadows. Was hooked on Dark Shadows as a kid, young. I would run home from the bus would drop me off, and I would run home to catch Dark Shadows and make sure I didn't miss it, which hooked my grandmother on all my children. Because she thought I was running home for All My Children, so she was watching with me. She got hooked on All My Children. I never paid any attention. I wasn't running home for the soap opera that didn't feature a vampire, right? But I was never scared of Dark Shadows. And just like Ken said, Scooby-Doo was huge, but it was always a man in a mask. So I was never really scared. You know, the meme going around is like Scooby-Doo is teaching kids that the actual problem is probably someone you know. It's not some stranger. So it's sort of like there is no stranger danger in Scooby-Doo. It's always some person that you should be looking at, giving side eye. But the thing that terrified me the most and really brought home that I can't take these things was Phantasm. I saw that on a date. We were at the drive-in, and it was cold, so all the windows were rolled up. And the opening movie was Boulevard Nights, which no one remembers because it was not great. It was about cruising in East LA. I know, hold your breath. It was not the Fast and the Furious. It has no DNA with the Fast and the Furious other than location. It was boring, and then we watched Phantasm. And most people have seen it, probably everybody who's on this panel has seen it, but there's a point. I start out the movie hating the kid, and by the end, I'm terrified for the kid, right? And there's a scene at the end where he wakes up, and his head is on best friend, his big brother's best friend's knee. And big brother's best friend, Reggie, is supposedly dead. And the kid wakes up, and he's like, oh, it was all a dream. And Reggie's like, everything that's happened to your family has been horrible. Pack your stuff. We're leaving. We're getting out of here. Your brother's my best friend. I'm going to take care of you. I am your family now, right? I relax. Oh, it's a happy ending because I'm an idiot. And I didn't go to horror movies. And Angus Scrimm is playing the evil guy, and he has this deep voice. And the kid swings the closet door, and you see Angus Scrimm in it. And he goes, boy! And he reaches through the mirror, grabs the kid, and pulls him into hell. I screamed so loud that men 7 cars over ran over because everybody thought I was being raped. My poor date, I probably punctured his ear. He's like, because he's in pain. These men are like pounding on the car. Stop doing whatever you're doing to her. And I'm just screaming. And we finally get the windows rolled down, and everybody's like, what's going on? And he's like, she was really scared. So there were good men out there in the 70s that would run when they heard a girl screaming her head off. They might never have done it again because it was a complete anticlimax. There was no heroics. But yeah, so Phantasm, quick coda. I'm turning on the TV. This is easy 40 years later. And there's some scene, and it's just, there's a guy standing in the middle of nowhere, and I look, and then there's the Reggie character. The kid's grown up, and I'm like, it was Phantasm 4, and I managed to turn the television off before I saw anything. So that should give you my level.
So Ken, let's save Jenny from herself.
Well, she hit 2 of mine, which was Scooby-Doo and Phantasm. But my absolute favorite is Kolchak, the Night Stalker.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I saw those at night when they first came out. I was maybe 4 or 5 when I saw them on TV, and this is late. And those things were awesome. Then, because they always showed the scary movies late at night back in the 70s. And so, there was one, oh, I can't remember the girl's name from Empty Nest, but she was on, it was when she was younger, and there was the gargoyle that was swooping out of the sky. That was a great one. That was the precursor, though, that led me to Kolchak. And it was, I know it's a Monster of the Week film, but it was fantastic. I think my favorite one of those was with the vampire, where his friend got turned, and then she like jetted out of town after he killed the main guy.
Wasn't that the premiere? Wasn't that the first one?
Might have been. That was, like I said, I loved the whole series. It was great, and him with his little tape recorder and seersucker suit and that terrible hat. Darren McGavin, I believe his name was.
Yep.
I had a crush on him because of that.
And
you still have a crush on the seersucker suits.
I do. I'm not going to lie, because they bring back Kolchak.
So I actually love him so much. I put him the Kolchak Club and Kane in one of my books. And it's a look-alike who is doing this right here, and he's a entertainer in a vampire club. So yeah, Kolchak was my first big one.
Bill, how about for you?
Okay, so literally the first movie I remember seeing, I may have been through Crib, is The Black Scorpion from, I think, around 1957 or so. It was on TV, and it's about a giant black scorpion, beautiful stop-motion animation by Willis O'Brien, who did King Kong. And there's a scene where the scorpions attack a crane, and they're just fighting over these little morsels, which are humans screaming as they get picked up. And from this, a love of giant monsters, an absolute obsession with stop-motion animation, enough to make me want to start making films myself, and a fear of scorpions. And I don't say phobia, because a phobia is an irrational fear, and there's nothing irrational about being afraid of scorpions. They're truly horrible. And if they're 50 feet tall, I mean, you ought to be afraid. But it was, then from that, Godzilla, and it was a great time. We only got 3 channels on TV. They showed more great stuff than I can get now with almost an infinite number of channels. All the classics were shown at different times on Saturday. It's a great time to be alive.
The same level of creativity poured from 3 channels across 10,000. So.
Yeah.
I think the stop motion class I took in high school was one of my favorite creative film classes. Just because we got to play with those little toys and make them seem like they were 50 feet tall and could do anything. Coolest class ever. I love stop motion.
I'm retiring after next year, but I'd come back and work for free to teach that class.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if you count Calvin and Hobbes and dinosaurs as monsters, I'd say age 3 to 4. I remember I wanted to see Arachnophobia and Gremlins. They came out, Gremlins 2, because Gremlins 1 was when I was a baby, but Mom and Dad wouldn't let me, which is probably for the best. I mean, Arachnophobia is kind of boring, and Gremlins 2 would have either been terrifying or also boring to a 5-year-old. But then elementary school and the Crestwood Monster books.
Layla, how about for you?
Oh, I started it.
That's right. Never mind. Sorry. It's one day. So, Derek, I'm going to come back around to you for this one. So, and I do want to comment, because going back, my first memories of like monster movies, the first one I really kind of remember is the classic King Kong from the 30s, the stop motion, that Sunday afternoon. Oh, this is kind of cool. I can see a big ape. Ooh, that was kind of fun, But the first time I remember something that actually sort of scared me was the Disney version of Sleepy Hollow with Ichabod Crane and that cartoon with the pumpkin head and everything else. And ever since then, you gotta love Halloween. But so
flaming pumpkin head flying through the air.
So Derek, I want to hit you up now. What for you is your absolute favorite out of the monster movies, especially since you started with the books, right? Out of the monster movies, what's your absolute favorite monster?
Wow, that is a hard question to answer, because I could go, like Matt said, the Crestwood Monster books sort of helped get me the education that I needed to, basically look for the things or be aware of the things that were available. But really for me, it's we got to go to Japan. We've got to go with Gojira, not Godzilla, King of the Monsters, which has its own charms. But if we're talking straight out monster movie, straight out horror movie, the original Gojira from 1954 really is undefeated. It is, it's breathtakingly shot. It has an incredible amount of meat on its bones with regards to how a culture is dealing with the fallout of the Second World War. It is terrifying, especially some of the early, just some of the early moments are magnificent in their atmosphere of dread. And it's really, for me, that's where my biggest nodal point is. It almost never gets better than that.
Jenny, how about for you?
I have an interesting relationship with monster movies because on a small screen, which is where I saw most of them, they weren't frightening. You know, when the screen is about the size of your head or your, the bust area, it's not frightening at all. Okay. It's just, isn't this interesting? Look, what a great companion piece to Speed Racer and Kimba the White Lion, right? That's kind of how I looked at those. They never frightened me. And a lot of stuff gets cut on television, especially in the bad days, in the olden days, the olden times, 12 channels and whatever you had on. I grew up in Southern California, so we had more channels. But things got cut for television, for, my delicate sensibilities. So there was nothing really scary. So my relationship to monster movies, I'm really interested in. But I noticed that what makes me frightened is the music. It's the score, because the music is set up to frighten you, to give you emotion. And I noticed that, especially like with the recent King Kong, the one that starred Tom Hiddleston, which I think is a wonderful movie, and Monarch, and some of the other more recent ones. I'm afraid in a lot of cases because of the score, but I'm fascinated. So they don't scare me as much. Any jump scare in the world can scare me. So it's not, it's a low bar, but most of those don't frighten me. The ones that scare me are it's more like someone's kind of human or not, and kind of doing horrible things. I can't watch stuff like that. Phantasm, everyone doing things, they're still human looking, right? Whether they are or not. That scared me, the jump scare like that. So I love monster movies because they rarely scare me, and so I get to watch them.
Ken?
So I don't like, so for the most part, I do not like jump scares. So most of those movies are out. But if we had to go with a couple of favorites, one is, of course, Phantasm. And then the other one is Dale and Tucker versus Evil. I'm sorry. Anything that can make me laugh that hard and still be that gory and that it's fantastic. But again, it's another Scooby-Doo thing. It's always, I learned at a very early age in life that the scariest thing on this planet are other people. Mm-hmm. And Scooby-Doo just reinforced that for me, and it's a very good lesson for every kid to learn. But, like I said, Dale and Tucker versus Evil, or Tucker and Dale versus Evil, I forget which way it goes. But
I keep hoping they're going to do the sequel they talked about.
Yeah, they keep saying they're going to, and they just haven't done it yet. I know Alan is down to do it. I don't think they have a script, though. The Dale sticking out of the guy's forehead, the sheriff's forehead. And my favorite part, though, was the wood chipper scene.
Yeah.
So, but those are probably my favorites. I don't really get particularly scared at any of them because they're designed to do jump scares, but they're not designed to be scary, in my opinion. It's just, not that scary. But
Bill?
Fandom is great.
Bill, what's your favorite monster, a movie monster?
I mean, it's probably Godzilla, but that's been taken. So a close second would be the creature from the Black Lagoon. And I love the creature. It's first of all, it's an absolutely fantastic design by a makeup artist who did not get credited for it, Millicent Patrick. They kind of shoved her aside, and just it's perfect. There have been other Gilman since then, and some of them have been excellent. The Shape of Water, the Monster Squad. There's been a few, but they're just pale imitations. They got it right the first time. And also, it was one of those movies that when you're watching it, even if you're kind of a dim-witted kid, you start getting this idea in your head. It's like, well, that's the monster I'm supposed to hate. You're kind of on the monster side here. And then you start, it gets you thinking, he's minding his own business. He's living in the Black Lagoon. He's the creature from the Black Lagoon. They're showing up and poisoning the place and trying to capture him to put him in a cage or something. He has a reason to be upset. You start thinking, well, the werewolf didn't really want to be a werewolf, and Frankenstein's monster is just basically a child.
Yeah.
If people would just leave them alone, except for Dracula, he's a dick.
But he's a sexy beast. Sexy beast.
Creature from the Black Lagoon is one of my favorites, and I both met, and I just went blank on his name, but the actor that wore the creature suit, he just passed.
Rico Browning.
Rico, thank you. I was trying to remember. I met him a couple of times at conventions. Mm-hmm. I've also, because that was filmed in Crystal River there outside of Ocala, and I dove in that spot. So, great waters to go into. Matt, who's your favorite movie monster?
Mine's a little more recent. There's a movie that came out about 2015 or 2016 called Monster. It's the mother-daughter alcoholism drama that suddenly has a lizard vulture abomination that attacks them in their car.
Yeah.
About halfway through. And it's got Chief Tyrrell from Battlestar Galactica as a tow truck guy.
That's a great one.
Zoe Kazan is in it. I tweeted my review of it to her and she thumbed it up.
Nice.
Layla, how about you? Who's your favorite movie monster?
I love this question, and when I used to write for a dark fantasy horror magazine, and I loved asking this question as an interview question, because mine is Jaws. It's the shark. I grew up on an island. Where do you swim on an island? You swim in the ocean. The score of all Dad's movies, like the music would scare me, but the blood, the gore, the chainsaw, all that never scared me. But if you have ever been swimming in the Pacific Ocean and in the back of your head you hear the Jaws soundtrack and the shiver goes down your spine and you're really scared to dive underwater or slide. They had this water slide out off Polaris Point Beach in Guam, where as kids we'd swim up, climb out, go up this big slide and then slide off the slide, and it would shoot you off into the water. And every time we launched, in the back of my head, I kept waiting to see a fin or the shark's mouth there. And that was the most terrifying thing ever, because I've been in the water when they whistle you in for sharks. I've seen the fin break when we were learning to surf and you get your butt on the beach. So that in the back of my head will always be the scariest movie. And my buddy and I just finished watching Jaws 1 through 4 and laughing at how bad 3 and 4 were. But the
Jaws
shark,
3D.
Yeah.
the shark. And I watched Jaws 3D. It was the first 3D movie I ever saw. I was in Pennsylvania with my aunt, and you had to go to 7-Eleven to get the big gulp cup to get the glasses for the 3D, and then they were playing it in 3D on TV that night, so we got big gulps, and we stopped at Uncle Joe's store and got the big bag of penny candy, and we went home and got popped the popcorn that was in the little pouch thingy, and we sat there and watched this movie, and that shark in 3D, oh my gosh, scary, will always be the scariest thing.
Did you see Deep Blue Sea?
I love Deep Blue Sea.
Or the Meg.
I have the Meg. So before he passed away, that was a thing of my dad and I's. We would watch every one of those shark movies. And even the screwed up ones. I've seen all the Sharknadoes, the Frankenfishes. There's one I was watching earlier that I have to finish. It's called Great White. And that one, I was like, what in the frickin'... I gotta watch the rest of this movie because now I gotta see how it goes. But if it is a shark movie, chances are, even if it's subtitled and I've got to read it, I've seen it. Sharktopus versus Petrocruda, I have put myself through that too.
Oh man.
So
Mega Shark, Mecha Shark.
sharks with freaking laser beams on their heads. So
Hey, there is a ghost shark that pops up in any water, including a toilet. So bring it on if it's a shark movie. I have seen it.
I'll be avoiding all of those.
And sharks. The sharks are swimming in the sand.
Check out Peter Benchley's Creature. It's a shark man.
Mhm.
Yep. Not only have I seen the movie, but there's actually a book. I have all of Benchley's books.
Yeah, I got the book and I was in 4th grade for a beach trip. Probably not a good idea.
Isn't that what turns all of us into horror writers? Is the fact of you went and you were going somewhere doing something and either read it or watched something at the absolute wrong time.
Mhm.
Right. So one of the things, and I especially love classic films, right? I mean, stuff, teens, 20s, 30s, any time period. And what always fascinates me, especially about horror films, is their ability to reflect the time period they're from. Like there is a, and I'm looking for it. I have not been able to find it. There's a zombie film that came. It was filmed in the late 30s. That is one of the first times that you saw, and it's done in a castle down in the islands, of course, and you've got all the zombies coming around and everything else. But it's one of those things where the female lead is not a scream queen. She's not running around afraid of everything. She really is kind of the hero of the film. And I saw it by accident at like 3 a.m. I don't know, probably about 15 years ago, up watching, and I've been trying to find it since then. But is there a particular time period of horror films that you love? Like, I love all the classic cheesy late 40s to early 60s black and white ones. Like, I mean, I went and they did a run of all the 3D movies from the 50s and 60s, Creature from the Black Lagoon, It Came from Outer Space, all of those. And I went to every one of them when I was like 11 or 12, wearing the little 3D glasses, the whole thing. Had a blast. So is there a particular time period of horror films that you really love and that speaks to you and that really kind of connects? And what's your film from that time period? So, Jenny? Phantasm in the 70s in the backseat of the car. I know.
No, I was in the front seat. We were not making out. We were watching the movie. That was the exciting couple we were. And then we had to sit through Boulevard Nights because I was too hysterical to go home. So we had to watch Boulevard Nights twice. That probably makes us the only 2 people in America who watched Boulevard Nights twice. I like the old classics, but again, they don't scare me. They're atmospheric, but they're always one step away from Abbott and Costello meet in my mind. Which I love. I love all of those. Those are hilarious. I like a genre of horror, and this should surprise no one. I like the comedy horror. And that runs across all the decades. So I like all the Abbott and Costellos. I love Zombieland and Zombieland 2. I think they're hilarious. I have to be sort of drawn into some of them, but most of them, if I'm going to be able to laugh along the way, I'm going to like it. And that really transcends an era. And for me, I kind of have to say that versus an era, because again, in the era, if it's really scary, I either didn't see it or I was horrified by it and never want to see anything like that again. You're talking to somebody who literally crawled under the seats in a movie theater in Hollywood to hide due to poltergeist. And screamed so loud at the reveal and Fright Night. So I am even Fright Night, which people like, that's funny. I'm like, that was not funny. Or I never laughed. I was terrified the whole time. I didn't laugh.
That reminds me, I finally persuaded my parents to take me to see Jurassic Park in theaters, and I was 8.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was when surround sound, mega sounds in movie theaters were new.
Mm-hmm.
The raptor in the crate scene scared me so much I spent most of the rest of the movie outside in the hallway.
So Ken, what's your time period, and what's your monster movie of the period? Who's your monster?
Well, okay. So I don't really have specific time periods. I like the black and whites. But if I had to choose, we're probably talking late 70s through the 80s, because they had the car. I don't remember if you know that movie or not.
Hmm.
It was a car that just ran around killing people. It wasn't Christine. It was the car. It wasn't as smart as Christine. It was just this big black car. And then there was Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Oh my God, I made it 5 minutes in that and had to run screaming.
My daughter is 21 years old now, and I let her see that when she was about 7 or 8. It is still her favorite horror movie. She loves that movie.
And yeah, so they have, but the 80s were chock full of nothing but really bad horror movies that were hilarious. I mean, if you look back at the Friday the 13th movies and the Halloween movies, they were pretty funny. I mean, you got Kevin Bacon with the arrow going up through his neck, and it's just like the look on his face is just, I mean, how can you take that seriously? And then Nightmare on Elm Street, all these franchises that we still have were born in the 80s. So I would probably have to say late 70s, early, throughout the whole 80s. And then even our made-for-TV movies that were horror movies, and of course, Elvira. You know, you couldn't be a young boy in that age and not watch Elvira. So, you know, all that was probably, I watched it way too young. Like I said, I started watching Kolchak when I was 4 and 5, and, you know, the premieres and stuff late at night. So it's like I had no supervision. You know, so as soon as these things hit TV, because we were not rich enough to go to the theaters, I was watching these things. So they were great. So probably the 80s, late 70s, early 80s. Mm-hmm. And Killer Clowns would be my favorite in the 80s.
And they've been talking about making a sequel to that one finally.
Oh my God, would they please?
Yeah, no kidding.
That would be amazing.
Oh.
All right, Bill, how about for you?
I would agree. Late. Okay, so 70, 79, 80, I was 18, 19 years old. I mean, that's a great time to be alive. I could drive myself to the movie theaters and watch whatever I damn well wanted to watch. The 80s are my favorite time. And the movie that's probably my number one, definitely in top 5, John Carpenter's The Thing. One of the greatest monsters ever. And there's so many reasons, besides the fact that it's virtually a flawless film. Absolutely brilliant. It's the last and the greatest hurrah of practical filmmaking. Anything that they do now, they've tried to do The Thing. They tried to make a sequel, prequel, and it's all CGI. And I'm not an anti-CGI person. I really, doing special effects, CGI solves a lot of problems. But the creativity that it took to make something that no one had ever seen before, there's a reality to it because it's real. Unless you can spend Avatar money, it's hard to make pixels look like they have weight and mass as compared to, I'll take even the shoddiest werewolf suit over the best CGI werewolf because I know it's real. There's a real person there suffering under it. But The Thing is just a brilliant movie, but it's also a heartbreaking movie because when I was watching it, I knew that I loved this movie to death and always would, and I knew it was going to lose money because I could read the vibe in the audience. That was the same time E.T. came out. That's what people were looking for in their aliens. This was too much. And I'll just never forget the grossest scene where the guy's head rips off and legs pop out and starts walking away, and this nitwit behind me was like, that's not real. I'm like, oh, yeah, no kidding. You're right, but I get it. It was just too much. We hadn't seen anything like it, and people just sort of pushed it away. But it's a great movie, great monster.
Matt, what about for you?
I'd say 80s horror movies. I'm trying to think of. I did like Gremlins. I eventually saw it in theaters, one of the Plaza ones. Okay, for those out there in Radio Land, Plaza Theater in Atlanta will do older movies sometimes. That was good. The Thing, I liked that. Let's see. American Werewolf in London is better than The Howling. We might be here for a bit, so maybe I'll stop. So maybe we should give everyone else a chance to talk.
If you want to talk about a better horror movie, yes. But there's a lot more to see in The Howling. If you were of a certain age.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, Joe Dante told her that they wouldn't see anything. The fire would cover everything. He lied.
The directors that lied? Yep. Okay.
A director would lie?
Hollywood. No, saying.
What does he think he is, a producer?
All right, Layla, what's your time period and who's your monster?
Well, I was born in 76, so I will preface it by saying I loved the 70s stuff, but I had to watch a lot of it when I was older because I, was tiny. But that being said, the late 70s, early 80s, and getting to watch those movies with both my dad and my stepdad, the Alien Queen from Alien. Holy crap. The ambiance of the movie, when you would start seeing just parts of her moving, and then of course, when you finally see this terrifying creature, the fact that it wasn't on Earth, the fact that you never know what's out there. And, as a kid, I was a kid who loved outer space, undersea. You read all these books and you see all these strange things they've already discovered. You can suspend disbelief and be like, this is a possibility of what is out there. And holy crap, it is terrifying to see her on the screen. And she's got that saliva dripping down and them sharp fangs. And I'm like, yeah, that is the scariest bitch this side of anything. Holy crap. Still love watching those movies for not only her, but for the way the crew interacted, the way the storytelling was done. It was another case of people not wanting to listen when somebody tries to give a warning either. And it's like, I always love watching those characters get their comeuppance and seeing them just kind of in pieces all over the place. And so that the Alien Queen, she is major, just bad, you know what.
Derek?
All right, I'm going to be just a slight contrarian and say that my favorite period actually is that 10-year period between Rosemary's Baby and Halloween. For me, that is the most fertile ground for horror film that you're possibly going to find. And in a way, it was because the MPAA code finally allowed people to show things that you were not able to show before. It didn't. If it was on the one hand, George Romero's first attack of the ghouls and Night of the Living Dead, and actually showing some of what the dead were eating, to 10 years later, again, George Romero, blowing the heads off of zombies with great glee and all of the orange red blood that you could possibly find. There's really, and I'm using those as tentpoles, but if we're looking at that period, we're talking about Let's Scare Jessica to Death, which is this really magnificent sort of folk horror vampire movie that's incredibly eerie. We're talking about OGs like The Exorcist and The Omen. The Omen, in a way, is a precursor to Final Destination, because you can view almost every death in that movie as a kind of unfortunate accident, and not anything, in the background. It's also a period where you're making movies in the wake of Rosemary's Baby, where you didn't need a lot to really terrify somebody. Now, there was a glut of stuff that you didn't really want to watch, or you want to watch it, but you have to have your tongue firmly in cheek, like with something like The Devil's Rain. I'm sorry, Ernest Borgnine is never going to be terrifying. But on the other hand, you will get things like Dario Argento's Profondo Rosso, or John Carpenter's Halloween. It's a little short. Monsters are in a little bit short supply, so I'm going to go with a human one, and that is Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The entire Sawyer family is, on the one hand, just terrifying in how much glee they're taking in trying to in taking care of their victims, but it's also really funny in that the sledgehammer scene actually plays a lot like a Three Stooges moment. So that would be my answer for 70s monsters.
And that moment when he's standing in the road and he's just spinning around with the chainsaw, and it's like, come on, dude.
Well, and looking in, since we're talking movie monsters and things like that, I want to talk a little bit about favorite franchises, because we've got so many franchises that have now stretched for decades. We've had reimaginings, reboots, turnover. I mean, one of my personal favorites still is the entire Tremors franchise, right? The Graboids are just ridiculous fun, right? The first Tremors, when you go watch that is in so many ways such a perfect little movie, because Kevin Bacon was like, oh my God, career is over. He and Fred Ward play off so well. There's so many things about the practical effects, the stuff going wrong in the desert. It's just such a fun little movie, and has blown up into this huge franchise. And to be able to take the dad from Family Ties and turn him into, a survivalist out there with an elephant gun, and Reba McEntire coming out, what more can you ask for? So, Ken, I'm going to start with you on this one. When we look at some of these bigger franchises, some of these things, we talk about The Thing, right? It's had a couple of films decades apart and some reimaginings. But what's the franchise for you that, the monster for you has been able to either hold up or not throughout the years, and as we've shifted maybe into CGI in some cases?
Scooby-Doo doesn't count, I take it. So
Yes, he does.
no,
The answer.
yeah, I agree with you. With Tremors is right up there, but probably Phantasm, because that guy who they had playing, I forget his name, but the Undertaker, with that sphere that had those little sharp forks on it, he was fantastic. He's what made those movies.
And it makes a great Christmas ornament, by the way.
Does it?
I've got the Christmas ornament, yeah.
Not in my house.
Oh, I have to buy more of that. And I don't know, the Hellraisers got a little crazy after a while, but you have to admit, they were pretty spectacular. First couple, the way they just stripped. It was probably the precursor to torture porn that we have now, which is Saw and all those movies. But it's had a really good mythology to it, and I think that's what really turns me on with Phantasm and the Hellraiser series. They built an entire backstory and mythology to both of them, and a lot of times they don't bother to do that. With Friday the 13th, they kind of retcon stuff and try to make it work. And Halloween, they just, let's be honest, that wasn't great what they did. But the other two had a plan from the beginning and ran with it. And it really showed, I think, in the quality of the movies. Again, they got trashy toward the end, but that's when people are just trying to make money. You can't blame the original franchise for that.
All right, Bill, What's your franchise?
I'm going to go with Hammer, the Hammer Film Studios, the Frankenstein series, because they were the only ones who seemed to understand that the monster in Frankenstein is not Frankenstein's monster. It's Dr. Frankenstein. And of course, they had the brilliant Peter Cushing as Dr. Frankenstein. You can't get much better than that. Instead of keeping the monster coming back, they just kept Frankenstein coming back. And if you watch them, now these movies were not really designed as a coherent series, but if you give it a little bit of artistic license, you actually see the progression of this character from this very amoral, dedicated scientist in the original Curse of Frankenstein to the final movie, Frankenstein, the Monster from Hell, where he is just an absolute nutter. He has failed too many times, and at this point, he is almost like playing with his food, just living in an asylum and taking the body parts and stitching them together into just an absolute atrocity, played by David Prowse. It's fantastic. And it was most of the good ones were directed by Terence Fisher. So you have my favorite actor, Peter Cushing, and one of my favorite directors, Terence Fisher. And they're just absolutely gorgeous movies, even though the budgets began to slip over time as Hammer began to kind of fade off into the sunset. You could do far worse. It's much more rewarding than watching the Dracula series, which is also fun. But Christopher Lee didn't particularly like playing Dracula, and it shows sometimes, whereas Peter Cushing's having the time of his life. So if you can I think there were 7 of them. David Prowse, wasn't that Darth Vader?
Yeah,
yes.
The body actor.
Yeah.
Yes, and he's unrecognizable, but he does show up occasionally in Hammer films. He has a wonderful role in Vampire Circus, which is one of my favorites. But Hammer, I just love Hammer. So that would be my favorite franchise, I guess.
All right, Matt, what's your franchise?
Okay, well, I liked Tremors 2 probably better than Tremors 1, just because more explosions and monsters. Overall, I think maybe Predator, because I liked the original Predator. Mm-hmm. I actually like Predator 2 better. I think Danny Glover's a better actor than Arnold. And they started crossing over with aliens, and that was fun.
All right, Layla.
Well, brought to life by the amazing Tony Todd, Candyman. That movie scared the shit out of me. One of the few movies that was people to just scare me. And a lot of it was the mythology and the backstory and his voice. His voice is terrifying in that movie. And I've watched all of them and the remakes and the way that they've been able to just keep that franchise going and keep giving new pieces of the myth and taking you like back to these same spots and these people who remember what happened at this point, but also remember what have happened, since that original point. And it's like, man, talk about a way to bring an urban legend and folklore and different things to life in a chilling, terrifying, uniquely beautiful way of storytelling. The Candyman franchise is amazing.
And the fun part there is that, those were real bees that Tony had to put up with, and his contract was like, for every time I get stung, it's $20,000. All right, Derek, what's your franchise?
Here's the funny thing. I don't really do franchises very much. I tend to prefer, like singletons, let's get in, let's do this, let's get out. And it's in large part because I'm not really all that fond of, things like world building and let's deepen the lore or everything else. I get bored with series very easily. Having said that, and this is where my mother is going to disown me, Psycho 2 and 3, to my mind, at least 2 is at least on par with the original. With Tony Perkins, released from mental care after 20 years after he's committed the murders, and then suddenly Mother starts haunting him again, and then you get to Psycho 3, which is which adds a little more sleaze to it, but also a lot more intrigue. And it turns out that Anthony Perkins was actually a really good and very solid director for that particular movie as well. I mean, look, I've seen Psycho so many times, I almost know it by heart. But, if we're talking about franchises, yeah, I'm going to go. And I don't really do franchises, the Psycho series, because really that maintains a certain level of interest that I usually don't find in a lot of others, and it's in large part because they resist the urge to become comedies, basically.
Jenny, Scooby-Doo?
Yeah, going straight, man. Scooby frickin' Doo. Okay, I can watch a Scooby-Doo anytime, anywhere, any place. It's still fun. It's still good. It's still got a man in a mask.
And Scrappy-Doo is still the worst monster.
Right? Okay, thank you. We all agree. And the only other thing I'd say is the Abbott and Costello's meat. Abbott and Costello meat, though. I love those because, again, they don't scare me. I just get to enjoy them. So those are my two.
Well, and there's a number of things we haven't gotten to, but this is kind of, what are some things we haven't talked about? And Bill, I'm going to go to you first on this, but I mean, there's a lot of things like, some things I have wanted to dive into, like, special effects, right? Whose movie monster has the best special effects? Whose movie monsters, have inspired some of your writing, all those kinds of fun things. So, Bill, what's something we haven't talked about yet with movie monsters you think we need to talk about?
There's the topic. I mean, there's so many things we could talk about. Special effects were my first love. And when you talk about monsters and special effects, the name that comes to my lips is Ray Harryhausen, the stop motion genius who inspired, not only are his movies great, I love them anyway. Jason and the Argonauts. I mean, come on. The complexity, it's so rare to be able to see something and realize that there was a single human mind behind this. And I thought for a while I would do stop motion animation. I dabbled with it and found out why people consider him a genius. He's a genius. And I could no more do what he did than I could chop a piece of marble and like Michelangelo. There's a reason why stop motion isn't really much of anything anymore. Only a few people were ever that good at it. It's like playing the theremin. But what's really amazing about Harryhausen, what really needs to be celebrated, is how many of the Spielbergs and the Joe Dantes and all the other filmmakers, genre filmmakers, saw his stuff and, like me, just said, "Oh my God, I got to figure out how they did this," and then wanted to do it themselves. And he made these other movies. I'll bet almost every film we've talked about, there's someone who, as a kid, was watching The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad on TV when they were a kid.
That little clockwork owl in Jason and the
Bubo.
Argonauts. Yes. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. All right, Matt. What have we not touched on?
Has anybody here seen Godzilla 1985?
Yeah.
For sure.
I think that was the first monster movie I actually saw. I was staying over at my grandparents' house and we'd rented it. The sea louse that jumps out of the locker and chomps on that guy at the beginning is probably scarier than Godzilla was. That's, jumps. I imagine I got into Godzilla through Calvin and Hobbes, because there's at least several strips where he talks about Godzilla movies, and my mom could explain to me the line he's making about the lips not moving when they're talking. So yeah, a bit of historical trivia there. Historically being late 80s, early 90s. Wow.
That was what, 5 years ago?
Well, Matt,
Yeah,
was really
yeah,
cool.
exactly that. Move on.
I looked up Boulevard Nights. That movie came out in 1979.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
Yeah.
I was dating, baby. Dating a lot.
All right, Layla, what have we not touched on?
Atmosphere and tone, and how important it is that the atmosphere showcase the monster, the creature, the story. I think for me, when I was learning to write, the horror movies were what I would turn to. And my early writing was dark fantasy and horror. And I would watch to see the atmosphere, the shadowing, how they created the ambiance, so that when you introduce this thing that's supposed to be scary, you've already set the tone for it to be scary. Like, there's nothing scary about, especially, with CG, when they put the skin or whatever, however they do that, and they put that coating on there, and then you're looking going, wow, that looks so plasticky. Like, that looks so fake because the lighting and the shadows aren't hitting it the right way, so everything blends. And I hate that because it's like looking at a frog. Like, everything's a frog monster because the outer skin of the CG coating looks just like frog skin. So when you look at those old movies and you see that movie monster creeping, you never saw a bit of the creature first. You saw a shadow. You saw the eyes. You saw a piece of fur or hand or something. And you saw it all creeping around a corner or out of a shadow or through the fog. You saw a shape moving in the fog. And so for me, that's something that's really important in those movies and something important to talk about, because some movies have had great storylines and great storytelling, but the way they were shot, it's just like, yeah, okay, you ruined the reveal because it looks so fake. It looks so bad.
Derek, what haven't we touched on?
You want to talk about a fertile ground. I mean, there's monsters are an embarrassment of riches in terms of topics of conversation. What I would point out is the accidents that make monsters classic. Part of what makes Jaws the absolute classic that it is 50 years later is that you almost never see the shark. And part of that was because they needed to film around the shark. I keep coming back to The Omen, which was released a year later. We're talking about CGI, and David Seltzer, the screenwriter, talked about the scene where where that spike is struck by lightning and impales the priest. And he said, we did all of that for about $15 with a spray painted cardboard and a fishing line. We didn't know what we were doing. We were just dumb kids trying to figure out how to make a movie. And a shot like that today would be close to, $250,000 trying to CG all of it. And then, and you even look at something like Dawn of the Dead, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. Part of its charm is that the effects aren't perfect. Like I said earlier, the blood is more orange than it is red. At one point, a man turns into a zombie and bites his wife's arm, and you can tell it is a latex effect, but it works. And for me, that's really it's part of the charm, and it's part of what makes a lot of these so special, is that they're looking at their limitations and they're going, how are we actually going to shoot this? And so there is a kind of do-it-yourself technique that actually allows them to create these really arresting images, as opposed to basically just showing you everything.
Jenny, what haven't we touched on?
Books to movies. In most cases, movie adaptations of books are not nearly as good as the books, except Jaws is not a great book at all. Okay. It's point blank summer trash. That's what it was supposed to be. It was a beach book. It's trash. And
you don't have to be generous to it. Okay.
Excuse me, my man. I read it in 8th grade. That book got passed around. Jaws came out. I was in 8th grade.
Okay,
Jaws came out. The book got passed. Somebody grabbed it off his mom's night table and was handed around my junior high with, read chapter 8.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I read chapter 8 and had no idea what was going on. Read the whole book. Still had no idea. Read the whole book. I was a great big grown-up girl not too long ago before I finally figured out everything that meant, and I'm not a wilting violet. It was just like, oh, that went in my young girl brain in a way that I didn't get it until I was a great big grown up. Carrie is the most boring book I've ever read. I mean, it's so dull. It's epistolatory, like Dracula.
Yeah.
Dracula's a really good book. So is Frankenstein, but these days, they're not nearly as scary. Frankenstein is actually a little more horrific than Dracula is, but you can make such wonderful movies from them. Carrie, terrifying. Saw that at the drive-in with my mother. I was lying with my head towards, she was lying with the head back in the back of our Volkswagen station wagon. And there was nothing scary in Carrie until the very, very end of that major jump scare. My mother laughed at Jaws. So I wasn't prepared when Perry White reaches out from the grave to grab Sue Snell that my mother was startled and she grabbed my leg. And the movie ends and I'm frozen. And she's like, oh, that really got me. How are you, Jenny, honey? Oh my God. Oh my God. I'm so sorry. That's me. I'm right. Right. So when I read the book, I expected to be just frightened. Snooze fest. So I think that horror in particular is improved from the books by being filmed because you can do more things, and it can be, if you're not with the author, if you don't like the author's writing style, and I'm just not a giant, Stephen King's short stories terrify me, but his long stuff puts me to sleep. So for me, seeing his stuff filmed is great because as long as it's long works, because it makes those books accessible to me that they're not. Like I said, so and Jaws, trust me, 8th grade me still says not a great book.
No. What I meant was that that's really an awful book.
Yeah, it's terrible, right? It's really bad in 8th, and it was so slim. It's a novella, okay, and I'm like, I didn't understand how they got a movie out of that book, which was, I wasn't old enough to really understand why a screenwriter really matters, but right. So I think that in most cases, I'm totally anti book to movie adaptations because the book is always better, except in horror. And then I am much more excited about the film than I am the book under most circumstances.
All right, Ken, you're going to get the last word. What have we not touched on?
Best dance sequence in a horror movie? Young Frankenstein?
Oh, God, yeah.
But in all seriousness, practical effects. I mean, so for instance, in Evil Dead, the original one, that one where they're going through the forest, that shot that just kind of goes straight through? Mm-hmm. They used a clothesline and a camera and zipped it through because they were broke. Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell were just flat broke, and it worked out amazing. And then another practical effect is Pinhead. Now, that, like I said, again, it was you can have a great setup, but a terrible execution. And the great setup for me was Hellraiser in the original ones. But the execution of Pinhead and the other Cenobites that's what cinched that whole thing for everyone, I think. And so I think practical effects, where you can get away with them. And I think that was the beauty of some of the stuff that we used to watch, was we didn't have the CGI, so they had to force. And so if they force more things and use CGI like it's meant to be used to enhance other things, it would be a lot better. But yes. I'm a big fan of that practical effect stuff.
It's interesting you bring up Evil Dead, because my wife decided she wanted to watch it after reading Bruce Campbell's memoir, and basically, said, I read how they made this movie. Now I need to see the movie.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, and there's some little cabin they owned or rented or something. It was made up for nothing, but it was so well done. And you can tell it was cheap, but on the other hand, there's a reason it's lasted as long as it has.
Yeah.
Same thing with the original Hellraiser. they lasted because of certain things. And if they would just go more with the practical effects, Werewolves of London is still a staple for a reason. And that's because that practical effect of the transformation. And it looks like it hurts. You know, it looks like it's painful, and it's fantastic. And, you know, because all the rest of them are not great. Up until then, we all know that there was a cutaway and then there was a werewolf. Or if they did try to do the transformation, it wasn't good. That was the first real transformation we saw on screen that was just like, okay, that's the one. And
Isn't
we
that
all
what Rick Baker? It wasn't that Rick Baker.
Yes, it was
That's what
Rick
he,
Baker.
like, basically built his career on, right?
Yep.
And didn't he turn around and do the Thriller video
Yes.
and the transformations of all the zombies in the Thriller video? Okay.
Yeah, and again, we're talking about practical effects, and that's why, like you said, Thriller still stands up, the video.
Yeah.
All these things still stand, even though everything else about the movies may not.
Mhm.
And they live and die on the fact that you see it and you go, oh crap, okay. And so when you first saw Pinhead, the first time I saw him, I was like, oh, that's just so cool. You know, it was amazing. Same thing with the other Cenobites. They were all fantastic. And you wanted to know more. You didn't care how gory it got. You wanted to know the lore. And you did eventually get that. Like, it didn't end up well, but, you know, it never does. When it starts becoming a cash cow, it never ends well. But, yeah, practical effects.
When the franchise goes to space, it never ends well, and both Hellraiser and Leprechaun did.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
don't forget they sent
Jason.
Friday
Jason
the
there
13th.
too.
I see
Forgot
those.
about that
and
too.
I see all of those and raise you Dracula 3.
Yo, 2000.
Oh.
Everyone has Casper Van Dien. Oh my God. I think it's 3000 and it's awful.
Yeah,
Like one
Dracula
of the worst
3000 in
movies
space.
ever made. So,
Yeah, well, the original Dracula 2000 was actually, that had the guy from Elementary. What's his name? Johnny Lee?
It had Johnny Lee Miller, and it had
and it had Gerard Butler in his first starring role.
Yes.
Now that particular movie was fantastic. Every Dracula whatever movie that followed got worse. I don't know how they managed to make it, and we're not talking about a little worse. We're talking like, how the hell did you go from this to this?
3000. It just awful. Just the worst.
And then you
Yeah,
I
have
think they were running out of places to send Jason because they'd send him to hell, then they sent him to space. I was waiting to see if they were going to try something else because
send him to the mall.
Jason,
Jason Takes
Didn't
Manhattan.
they do that?
yeah, he went to Manhattan too.
He did go to Manhattan, but I thought he went to the mall at one of them. Christ, I think
I might have been in Manhattan.
Jason and the Muppets. That's what they do.
Oh,
Jason and the Bad News Bears go to Japan.
have Jason.
I am
be a
in.
oh
Muppet.
no.
I am so in.
Have Jason be a Muppet. That is the king right there.
Jason
All right,
goes
on
to
that
Japan.
note,
Oh, come on, man.
we're going to wrap the monsters up. But before we do, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you guys. You know, website, social media, and of course, what of your monsters do people need to be adding to their to be read piles? So, Layla, you're up first.
All right. Well, you can find me at Layla Dorine, author at Wix.com, Rainbow Lyrics and Mellow Mushrooms. You can find me at Facebook, Instagram. I'm working on Blue Sky. I swear I'm trying on TikTok. And as for monsters, I have Wolverine and Hedgehog shifters. Prayers for the Prickly came out a few weeks ago, and you can find it on Amazon, and it's already being made into an audiobook.
Derek?
You can find me at DerekAustinJohnson.com. I occasionally post on Facebook. I occasionally post on Blue Sky. Very occasionally post on TikTok. Monsters from me. I've got a story called Prodigal and an anthology called Interior Skies, which has actual honest-to-God lizard people in East Texas.
Jenny?
GiniKoch.com. If you want to join my free newsletter, hook me up. You can do so on the bottom of most of the pages of that website. I'm all over Facebook. I'm on X, Twitter, Blue Sky, Pinterest. And my most applicable release just came out at #1 in 3 categories. I'm very proud. Media and Me, My Love-Hate Relationship with Hollywood, which is me doing movie reviews. And Matthew actually has both dedication and acknowledgments because he's the guy that suggested I do the book. So my publisher, Ginger Blue Publishing, was very glad about that.
And it's hilarious. Definitely read it.
Ken?
KenLang.com, KenLangAuthor.com, Facebook, Blue Sky occasionally if I can make it. And as far as monsters for me, the Lit RPG stuff has vampires, the Illuminati lizards, kobolds, goblins, you name it, we have it. And in the Nine Realms saga, we have vampires and I don't know what else, just everything you can think of just about in there as well. So they usually get murdered though, so it's all good.
Bill?
You can find me at BillMulliganBooks.com, and you can even find my one book. So BillMulliganBook.com would have been more accurate, but that's all right. And it's got monsters, though. It's got demons, and demons are the best. I think there's a reason why they're the most popular monster, I think, in cinema right now. They don't really follow. Like, any rule you want is okay for a demon. They can be good, bad, indifferent. They're demons, you know? It's not like they have rules like vampires and zombies. The rules are whatever you make them.
And Matt?
Okay, I have a Substack, The World According to Quinn, which I have both free and premium posts. My most relevant fiction is the Thing in the Woods, which is like a small town Lovecraftian stuff. The Atlanta Incursion gets into the Greys and MIB, and the new one, my Kickstarter project, The Walking Worm, which, to make an X-Files reference, this is a Monster of the Week. And my steampunk series, Battle for the Wastelands, critters show up, but they're not the focus.
And you can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentialsworkshops.com, creatingpros.com, and of course here at ConTinual. And we will see you again soon.